that line, in my opinion. So, and I wasn't entirely aware, but the good news is that we have the Moodle Mobile 2 that Martin was showing that is already based on Angular, right? Using Ionic, and it's using REST calls to our web services to serve something, to serve a mobile Moodle that is fairly complete and is getting more complete. So that is happening already, and that is a fantastic starting point. It is, it proves that Moodle can be built this way. And who, okay, I'll switch the question around. Who has not built stuff with Angular or a similar framework? Okay, so I will explain a little bit of what's different about these new frameworks, because from the point of view of web development, it changes a lot the dynamic we are used to. So I'm going to describe many applications, and a lot of people use hybrid approach, a hybrid approach, or mix and match bits and pieces. I'm going to describe how the pure Angular stuff works, which is the new paradigm for us to understand. And then we will find that some things you do one way, other things you do the other way, right? So it doesn't mean that absolutely everything gets served and built this way, but this is the new thing that we need to picture. So what you find when you look at applications built on Angular, usually what I'm most experienced with is Angular with Restangular. I understand that Ionic is very similar, is that from the web server, we're going to serve a bunch of static things. And today we serve images. We're going to simplify here. We serve CSS, right? And we're going to serve literally the templates, right? We're going to serve complete templates for all the things that we might need. Are we going to have forum post? Forum thread view. We're going to have a template for each forum post, right? And we're going to serve it to the client. It goes to the web browser. And we're going to have a whole lot of JavaScript. And we're going to serve almost no HTML of the HTML we're used to, right? There'll be a tiny bit of HTML that bootstraps, that not the bootstrap theme thing, but it kicks off, right? It kicks off the JavaScript. And what the JavaScript does, it says, I'm getting started, and it says, where is my REST endpoint? Which modules have I got available? What things are configured to run? And which is my REST URL? And it says, I have 5 modules, and each of those 5 modules want to know, let's say each of them wants to know one thing. And it will issue 5 REST calls, right? I'm simplifying lots of things. Of course, if you need to authenticate first it will say, oh, I need to show a login page. Show a login page. First thing, I'm simplifying. But if you need to show 5 things and you're getting started, you have no local information, you issue 5 separate REST calls. You say, I need the list of courses. And if you do a get to a list of courses, you do a get to content of course 1, 2, 3. You do a get to recent activity, course 1, 2, 3. If you have 5 blocks in something like Moodle, each block will issue its own REST request. And the code will not block. It will. That's why when you use these applications, you see that maybe there's a block and it has a little spinning thing that is waiting, right? Because you fire off the REST request and you register handler, right? And when the data comes back, you load it. But the nice thing with Angular is that you don't literally process the data. You put the data, for example, in an array, and you have mapped that array, for example, to a table. And the table is in a template. And Angular will build the table for you. If it's empty, no table. And you populate the array, and magically, the DOM gets manipulated for you. So we never actively manipulate the DOM. We say, oh, there's going to be a forum. Here we're going to display a forum. And you say, well, the forum is a binding between this template and this array, right? And the template has all ID tags around ID and class tags in each HTML element, and you basically say, oh, here goes the title, right? And here goes this and that, and you just put, you just connect, set up the bindings between an array that maybe has hash elements inside, right? Has each element of the array is a hash, and that hash has 5 properties, and those 5 properties get automatically mapped to the template, right? It saves a ton of programming, and it executes really fast, right? So this is the model in which Angular applications and applications with similar frameworks are built, and that is how the Moodle Mobile is built now. And when you get the hang of it, it's a bit tricky to wrap your head around. When you get the hang of it, it's really fast. Those who have built stuff with Angular, right? Have you built more than 1 or 2 pages? Right. Once you have 1 or 2 pages, it's right. You have in your mind, I'm going to put this data on this array and this template, and it's really fast, right? If the data mapping is reasonable. If the database has one thing and what you have to display something different, you're going to have to work more. But if the data structure is straightforward and is similar to what you're wanting to display, it's really trivial. Now, so that's very nice, but it doesn't change how applications, doesn't change radically our application. It does allow us to have single-page applications because everything is JavaScript controlled. Then you just serve the big glob of JavaScript, and it just works for users. But again, it's in one time. We haven't taken that road in Moodle for a number of reasons over the years.
What does it say on the screen on that thing?
I pressed it. I touched it. What did
it says in the top right-hand corner of it.
the top?
Does it say power on or
No,
something?
did your laptop?
Did your laptop go to sleep?
Sorry?
No, I can see the laptop's still on. I see it's the same
I
issue.
changed it. I changed it again.
Projector light's not blinking this time, so it doesn't look like it's like an overheat issue.
System's on. Yeah, I was just swapping it back and forth to force it.
There we go.
There it is. There we go. So the part that is missing, so one web app that we all use that uses this technology is a Gmail. Almost everybody here will use Gmail or some modern version of Hotmail or Yahoo Mail that I haven't seen in years, but I'm sure use similar techniques, right? And now these applications have an additional thing that a pure Angular plus REST setup doesn't give you, and it's that you see live updates. If an email arrives, you don't have to hit refresh, right? And although in years past, maybe we would have thought, oh, every once in a while there's a JavaScript that fires off and and pulls the server, that's not how it works today. How it works today is that there is a connection, a permanent, persistent connection to the server where the server sends messages, right? And that's using a standard called WebSockets. That, from the programming point of view, they look just like a Unix socket. They're not a Unix socket. If I try to talk raw sockets to it, and it's a pain. There's a lot of scaffolding to make it work, to make it cross proxies, to make it just function in the web environment through NAT and so on and so forth. So it's not as trivial. You can't telnet into it, right? It doesn't work. I tried. There's a whole. No, I do telnet against HTTP all the time. Like, oh, there's this problem. We're not sure. I'm like, oh, you young ones, I telnet into my service. I telnet into Moodle. So, but you can't do it here. At least you would have to do like inline base64 encoding in your head. So it's kind of fun. But the interesting thing is that the WebSocket connection is persistent, and both ends can talk at any time. So if you program both endpoints right, the client can say something to the server anytime, and the server can say something to the client anytime. And the way we normally use it is to say, I'm in this web application, I am looking at this particular page. This page is the list of students, for example, of a course. And you say, subscribe me to a channel that says updates to the participants list of course 1 to 3. And whenever there's something, there's a student added or a teacher added to a course, I get a message that normally does not contain all the news. It just says there's something new about participants to this course. And the JavaScript on the web browser gets that message pretty much instantly. In my experience, it's instant, right? There is a little bit of back off if there's thousands of users connected, etc. But essentially, it's instant. And then the web browser will issue a REST request to say, give me the current list of users, right? If it's a type of data that is adding, say, we could be looking at the live logs, the Moodle live logs, and instead of issuing a refresh, you would be listening to events of there's something new, and then you issue a REST request that says, give me log entries since the last one I've seen. So the JavaScript code would say, the most recent entry I've seen has this timestamp, so it can say to the server, give me entries since this timestamp, right? And that resolves lots of race conditions because you'd be getting many events, and the events you hear on the WebSocket would be kind of racing with your own requests for new data. So that allows you to skip some requests.
Sorry for this ignorance. Are
Yes.
those WebSockets going over 443 to, let's say, your Apache server?
Yes, they're going
Okay.
443, they're crossing proxies, they're crossing everything.
And let's say you've got 1,000 students online. Is
Yes.
that going to double, triple, quadruple the number of web server processes?
I'll talk about that.
Okay.
It's a fantastic question. I'll talk about that. You end up, when you set that up, you end up with a dedicated multiplexer. And I'll
Okay,
talk about
right.
that.
Okay.
In fact, earlier today, I have a multiplexer implemented in JavaScript, and I'm trying to re-implement it in either Python or PHP, and both languages are giving me trouble. And so I'm just going to improve the JavaScript one I have. That's a very important point there. But yeah, that's one of the challenges of this model, and we'll get to it. So I'll give you a quick demo of what it looks like. I'm sure everybody uses. I got it. Right? It's like a squirrel running away from me.
You need a REST thing of a WebSocket. So.
I need a website. Yeah. I need. What's the name of the Addams family? The right on the laptop. So I'll give you a quick demo. So, can I trust you, folks?
No.
Okay, take the picture now. Take the picture now. You film it? Is this the video? Oh, damn. Okay, so video for a moment. No. Okay. So I'm going to show something that I shouldn't show you.
User data.
Oh, that.
Let's think about holidays. No, I shouldn't show you this because you'll think of this. Okay, one of the first killer uses of this kind of technology is multi-chat.
Would be great.
Right? We should have something that's instant, something that's not polling, right? We should have recent activity block scrolling down, just like, say, your Facebook or Twitter windows that go scrolling down, and they're not polling.
And we shouldn't have something that kills the server.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you implement this right, and we do the multiplexing of the messages right, you don't murder your servers.
I remember those days when Moodle chat would bring down our entire Moodle instance. Yeah, like a class of 60 people would start on chat and it would entirely break.
So
Finals, I had the neuter chat.
Martin, have you thought about how you would register all these listeners?
How do you register?
As in, so I'm looking at forum post 25. What would be doing the listening?
Who would be doing the listing?
Well, well, you register a WebSocket that says I'm
Yes.
listening for that object.
Yes.
But how would you keep track of the listeners and that kind of
That's
stuff?
again the same multiplexer that he was asking about. So I'll show you the code I have.
Okay.
I can show you JavaScript code and I can show you Python code is more readable, but I just hit a wall, and the Python code is readable but doesn't work.
And how the listener is written is really important to determine whether something's changed. It can be a very expensive query, or you can be very clever and find something that's not.
Yes, and so those are fantastic points. And so I'm going to turn to the second part of this, the extended part of this. So I'm going to make a statement, which I think it's perhaps a little bit radical, but I think that Moodle Mobile 2, or a very close sibling of that code base, I'm not saying it has to be. I heard of it as an Angular-based code base only yesterday. I reviewed the code a little bit. I think it's really interesting. I think it's pretty close to being a reasonable base to the start of what should evolve to become the mainstream Moodle we use.
Good for you.
Right? But to get from here to there, we need to think about lots of things and discuss lots of things, and there are lots of real challenges and problems. So,
The thing to watch out for is the other Martin thinks similar things. Or he has vocalized similar things in the past.
right. So, but I think the path is quite close to the point where we can move it quickly. So I could have said this maybe 2 years ago, and lots of things were not ready. Even if we had put a push, even if somebody worked really hard on it, lots of things were not ready. Maybe I should stop and say why I think things are ready for this. So maybe that's important. Things have changed. The first thing is that web browsers have evolved, right? In part, it's a code-dependent situation with all the industry of people writing code, right? People have been writing a lot of code that requires all this stack to work, and so web browsers, where it didn't work, had been shaken out of the ecosystem, essentially, right? Anybody who can't handle this, anybody with a web browser who can't handle this, can't handle much of the interesting internet today, right? And so that's getting shaken out. The second thing, I think very important, we built a lot of Moodle the way we built it, which is essentially it must be able to run without JavaScript, because that was the only way to make it accessible. That is no longer true, right? We built Moodle forms, and one of the main drivers of Moodle forms, consistency and stuff, and one of the main drivers was make Moodle accessible, and it was very hard to make it accessible if we didn't enforce lots of rules around how we did the JavaScript validation, because doing all those things in an accessible manner was hard. That's much simpler now. Web browsers are much better and can handle JavaScript-driven applications that are built. Of course, we still need to put due care in making it accessible, but it's possible. It used to not be possible. JavaScript-built pages used to be invisible to screen readers. No longer true, right? And and then users want it. Users crave it. We crave it. Web applications that tell you information in real time are fantastic, and they're sticky. We use them more and more, right? And so those are the reasons why I think now is the time, right? And also the frameworks have evolved to the point where they're no longer horrible, right? Because for a long time I watched lots of JavaScript frameworks, and I've been, oh my God, what are these people thinking? And what is happening? And now that we have frameworks that are really nice, and that makes things easier, and you can make them modular, because lots of the frameworks before were very cumbersome to build in modular fashion. Anyway, back to here. What I think we're going to need. So we're going to need the base today for Moodle Mobile 2 is Angular and Ionic. I think there's a case to discuss whether perhaps adding Restangular, because from what I've seen, how Ionic deals with Rest is good, but it's not as good as Restangular, and we probably are going to need those smarts, but that's something that I'd say it's a good idea to explore. and then you really want dedicated REST endpoints. So you need REST endpoints, but to do all the cleverness of querying them smartly, right? And query them and get just the exact amount of data. And they're usually tied very closely. If you're gonna have good REST endpoints, they tie very closely with how you're doing your front end. And every time you add a feature in the front end or you add a new thing, you tweak the REST endpoints to match the data that the front end needs. So the web services endpoints we have today were built for integration, so they are API. So we can't change them, right? We can go willy-nilly and say, oh, before it was returning whole objects, now it's going to just return IDs, and this endpoint moves to here, and for this, you're going to return the list of IDs, and then the client needs is going to return every object, and this other one is going to, well, this other one, so because you do those things to make it have to work fast and to evolve together with how your front-end interactions evolve, right? So it is my opinion that to move fast and have a very, very good front end based on this strategy, we are going to want to split the web services stuff and say we do maybe initially clone it under different directory, like different /foo something, but evolve it independently. And I also think that right now the way we handle the kind of, I can't remember the word we used, but essentially the web services authentication cookie and kind of session thing, because we're going to hit it a ton, we need to make it super efficient, right? So again, we need to break API with what we have been doing for web services integration. Because those we can't change because they're used for integrations. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how much you've been playing with Angular 2.
Sorry, with?
Angular 2?
Angular 2. No, I don't think I have been playing that much. But I hear good things about it, and it might be an option. I don't think the shortcomings of Angular 1 are so bad. I think they're about ramp up. I think they're about ramp up for large projects.
I would disagree with you when it comes
Okay.
to accessibility.
Okay, so
Accessibility is baked into Angular 2, has to be added as a secondary input with Angular 1.
can you say that a bit louder?
I said Angular 2 has accessibility baked in, whereas in Angular 1, it's a secondary thing you have to add in. I've
Okay.
actually done a lot. I was at the CSUN conference this year
Okay.
where I'm at. The other part of it is the performance difference between the two, and then the fact that you essentially have to rewrite your Angular program to work with Angular 2.
Yeah, so that's the point. So I'm happy with that. If we review it and say Angular 2, I'll say yes, Angular 2. I'll battle other, I'll argue other points, but that's fine. In fact, I don't care about the framework. One of these frameworks that we need to look that it works well with the that it works well with dependencies, so we can do all our modules, and if modules are interrelated, we can declare that so things are in scope or reachable from JavaScript, from one module to another, from one plugin to another, etc. If we need to, similarly. Well, that it meets our needs, but it's super important that we switch to this general type of frameworks.
Because the last thing you want to do is adopt a framework that's going to have the same fate as the UI one.
But you can't predict that, because
You can't predict it.
at the time we picked UI, it's not like
Yeah,
UI
true,
was
true,
some
but
small.
I'm pretty sure I can predict that.
Yeah, we can't predict
Because,
the
no,
future.
but I'm just saying that
Google
because
guidance
there's
projects all the time.
Yeah.
Angular 2 out now, so
Yeah.
it's kind of on its way. I didn't know that there was an Angular 2 just.
But I think, in a sense, I think that the JavaScript development community moves way too fast, right? So any framework that we choose that has matured to a point where we can use it for a widely used application like Moodle, by the time we can truly use it, we are always at that risk. So we have to look at it on its own merits and go, is it good enough? And I think that risk, we're not going to find a framework where if it's so new that we think it's going to be long-lived, there are other risks involved. I mean, I don't know. That's it.
Have you played with any of the PHP frameworks, since you're now talking about separating the REST as a new potential project or a new part of Moodle, but not changing the database to the data backend? Would we be able to start taking advantages of?
So we could, but I think that becomes so much larger. So I'll put it this way. If you ask me in a vacuum, right, I would, yes, rewrite much of the backend as well. But I'm trying to look at something that can be built from now. And one of the things that this opens is, if we do this, and the backend of Moodle essentially gets transformed into a very powerful REST endpoint server, then it becomes a lot more viable to rewrite the backend.
And then we can have PHP front ends that aren't connected to the logic layer except via REST.
Yeah. But this is more immediate, because the thing is, if we rewrite the backend, I think that the main benefit we're going to see is, say, developer productivity, right? But I don't think we're going to see a different type of end-user interaction. Whereas the work that I'm proposing opens a different mode of usage, right?
That could leapfrog Canvas.
That's my goal. That's my goal. Chart a map that, say, within X amount of time, within X amount of effort, because that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. Yes.
He gave me some notes as to what to ask him.
Steve, what did you say?
That would allow us to leapfrog Canvas.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I heard you properly.
Yes. That's what we're here to do.
Where do I vote? Tracker.
Because we can improve Moodle in lots of little 5%, but if we don't do that, then our path gets much harder. Anyway, back to the more detailed things we need. So I do think that at some point we'll find a fork in the road, and we need to split the REST endpoints and move really fast on REST endpoints. And we want to use WebSockets for the live updates. And when we design the REST endpoints, when you know you're going to be using WebSockets, you design the API of the REST endpoints a little bit different. Lots of REST endpoints end up having, give me all the objects that meet this criteria and that have been updated since timestamp, right? And so, give me all the objects related to this that have been updated since this timestamp. And usually with Angular and so on, so you build it a lot to meet Angular or whatever framework to have minimum impedance mismatch, right? So, for example, right now, if you work with Angular, Angular wants to use microseconds. So you use all the timestamps for microseconds. Otherwise, you write a lot of code to be multiplied by 1,000, divided by 1,000, blah blah blah. And whenever you forget, nothing makes sense, and you get too many objects or no objects, no responses, and so on and so forth. Similar with the data structures you return. You want data structures. Right now, what happens is that it saves you mountains of code if the stuff you return matches all the way from the database tables to the front end, right? You use the same database table names as the object names. You use the same field names as are going to end up as properties in the front end. And then you just built a lot of plumbing. You filter things out based on access control and so on and so forth, but the data, you essentially build a fantastic pipe end-to-end with some transformations along the way, but you try to remove all the pointless transformations, essentially, right? So to get the data at the other end. Okay, so we talked this I already covered in various examples. So things we will need. Okay, so I talked about WebSockets, but it's not listed here. I'll get to the multiplexer you're talking.
Can I make a comment on
asking me about, because it's an important part of it.
Yes. Live updates.
Yes.
I have a comment on that. We developed a JavaScript gradebook
yes.
that detected whether scores changed and then would update the scores automatically, just like this. But I don't want to actually have that screen refresh automatically, because I might have a TA changing grades and it happens like every second, and so I don't want that changing. So I think we will need to be able to detect when the data is changed in some scenarios and give the person the option of refreshing the data.
But you wouldn't want the field to change?
What if I was like editing some scores on this page?
The only place where the picture is where you're editing literally the same one that comes through the pipe.
But I might not want stuff to change on my screen automatically on some screens. I think there might be some screens.
I would want at least some marker to tell me, for example, if I'm entering grades or updating grades and the grades are changing.
That's right.
I would want maybe the fields to turn gray or change color or something.
That's right.
Because maybe somebody else is editing it. So, okay, yes, that's possible. It's a little bit of a special case. You're trying to control or help the user detect a race condition between two users.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So yes, you can do that. Yes. So that you receive the data, and in JavaScript you go, oh, the user, it looks like the user's editing. So yes, maybe that's a reasonable behavior, and you would implement that in JavaScript at the front end, trying to be clever about it. So so just to talk a little bit about how the machinery works when this is when this is working. So you have, this is the web browser, right? In here you have data and tables and stuff, and in JavaScript you are going to have kind of a subscription manager. An application like Moodle is going to have an object in the DOM that listens for requests from different modules, from code from different modules and blocks and plugins to say, I want to get subscribed to channel ABCD, I want to get subscribed to these events from this channel, and register a callback handler for the different channels, right? But you want to have exactly one WebSocket from this client, from this web browser. You want to have only essentially one WebSocket connection. People write it as WSS for, I guess, WebSocket secure, because it's 443. But you want essentially one WebSocket connection, and over that WebSocket connection, different modules work through this broker and say, subscribe me to channel foo, and subscribe me to channel bar, and subscribe me to channel zoo/123, the course 123, right? And so particular things that we're subscribed to, but all those instructions to subscribe all get piped through one channel. This subscription manager also recognizes if the connection has dropped and reestablishes it, and it remembers what we were subscribed to.
But from a load perspective on the server, we're still going to have 3,000 connections instead
I'll get there.
of...
Just one moment. Just one moment. I'll get there. But yes. I'll walk the connection all the way, and we'll talk about all of those points. So, but at the client side, so we need this little subscription manager that remembers all the requests and keeps a list. Oh, we're supposed to be subscribed to these 5 things, because if we change to another page, in a sense we change to another view of the application, some of these blocks might not be displayed, and we might say, oh, for that block we subscribe to bar, so 2 options: we unsubscribe from bar, right, because we're not going to have it around, or maybe we keep the subscription but disable the callback. Right?
We're talking blocks of code, right? Not blocks. Because if we're going to rewrite the user interface, I want to get rid of blocks.
You want to get rid of blocks?
Yeah. We're talking blocks of code, right?
I'm talking about Moodle blocks or any plugin. Any plugin. This is just
something
an
that
example.
on the screen and you want to update.
Your Moodle page has things that come at any given time. It's displaying things that come from 5 different plugins.
Would it make you happier if we called it a widget?
Yeah, any kind of widget. Yeah, any kind of widget. So you will be subscribed. Moodle will continue to be modular and different types of modules. But Here in Moodle land, if we say module, we are referring to activity module, right? So that's why I say blocks or plugins, right? So anyway, if we moved away from this page, you probably want to unsubscribe from the bar channel, which you did on behalf of that module. And then you'll resubscribe when you come back to that page. But the most important thing is that if the connection drops, because it can happen, the user is in the train, the user is using the phone, that connection, blah, 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 the connection drops, you need to be able to reestablish and go, actually, we subscribe to these 5 things, resubscribe to the same 5 things. At the server side, this is going to get interesting. At the server side, what you have is, you usually have, I'm going to put here, Apache or Nginx. I always forget.
INX.
Nginx? Yes.
I.
No?
INX.
NGINX.
GI. Right, there we go. So both can handle this, and so they had. So you can say any request to this particular path actually gets passed on to a WebSocket server, and it knows how to talk the protocol. It uses a funny HTTP command that's called upgrade. I don't fully understand how that, why is that way, but that's the magic signaling that says it's not actually a regular HTTP request, right? And it transforms it from a regular HTTP request into a WebSocket request. And any proxy around the middle is going to, it should understand this. There are a few problems if the proxies around the middle and machinery around the middle doesn't recognize this. And what we do is we resort on the JavaScript side. Is everybody familiar with polyfills?
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the factors that the JavaScript community has come up with, the concept of polyfills that work really well. Before, this wasn't well established. Now there's a strong practice around polyfills, and that's one of the factors that allows us also to move, to move on and to be able to use these things.
Polyfill is basically backporting a new feature to old JavaScript by basically using all the old JavaScript to make a fake version of the new thing. They call it polyfill, although it's not really unique to JavaScript world. Like there are polyfills for PHP code to make new features and stuff like that. But JavaScript was the one that first did it really heavy.
Yeah. So it's a fallback that looks like the true API. If you use a modern web browser, you use WebSockets. And if you use an old web browser, you install this magic library, which is a polyfill style library that checks and says, is there a WebSocket implementation in this web browser? No. Okay, I'll load mine, and it's a pure JavaScript implementation.
Yeah, that's actually why we use YUI and Bootstrap and all these, because they include polyfills for all the things we need.
Yeah, exactly. So there are polyfills that navigate the different proxies. I think that, and as an initial implementation of this, we're going to have to use what's available, and some things will break. Some users with really old stuff won't be able to use this, but we have to move forward and explore this. So anyway, Apache, Nginx, they pass on the connection to the WebSockets multiplexer. And what this usually is a very, very small JavaScript running on Node.js. And it's a very cleverly written bit of JavaScript, written purely asynchronously, that will handle thousands of connections. It will keep track, it's one process, really small, right? It will handle thousands of connections. It will know who's subscribed to what. For every channel that it has a connection, so this will establish only one connection to your message queue, right? Your message queue could be Redis, could be RabbitMQ, or it could be Postgres which if you're using Postgres as a database, Postgres has a fantastic message queue that's integrated. You just say notify and it just boom, happens. So if you're using Postgres, it saves you from running yet another daemon. So it could be any of these. And the message queue gets, so running these things this way kind of forces you to have the ability to have many connections either in Apache or in Nginx, which completely rules out, well, not for development, but for production, completely rules out using mod PHP. If you're going to use Apache, so either through Apache or Nginx, you have to use fast CGI. Right? Because, yes, Apache and Nginx will pass through to your multiplexer, but yes, there will be 5,000 connections if you have 5,000 concurrent. The day you have 5,000 concurrent users, you will literally have 5,000 open connections literally all the time, although they're passing almost no data, or tiny bits of data occasionally. There are 5,000 connections permanently established, right? So your Apache and Nginx or Nginx configuration has to be ready to handle literally thousands of connections, right? Or one per user. And so that rules out mod PHP, right? Because there's a huge memory footprint there. However, what you do here is you have, you use, I think it's PHP FPM, right?
Yeah.
That's the name. I forget the name. So you have to use PHP FPM, yeah? And of course this moves, I mean, if you're using load balancing proxy, you need to make sure that the load balancing, if it's a load balancing proxy that is doing your HTTPS and it's working at the HTTP layer, you could do this split at the load balancing proxy, right? So this split of traffic could happen at the load balancing proxy. So, and eventually, you could have more than one multiplexer. So you could have additional multiplexers and additional machines, right? At some point, this is developed very cleverly, but the thing is, Node.js is still single-threaded. So it's developed asynchronously and it runs very cleverly and very fast, but you might need, you might get to a point where you need, say, 5 instances of it. And here you configure Apache or Nginx to do a kind of round robin whenever a new connection comes, assign it to the next one.
So I mean, imagining you had one web server, you would be kind of having a bunch of Node.js's even in that one web server, or
I think only if your web server is gigantic and is handling thousands of several thousand concurrent users. Otherwise, if you have a cluster, then if you have a cluster and say you have 5 web servers, maybe you have then 1 or 2 machines running Node.js, and each of those machines runs maybe 4 or 5 instances of Node.js. We need to find out. I don't know.
But you can run multiple Node.js.
Yes, yes, and basically what you do is you tell Apache or Nginx that instead of one Node.js backend, you have a pool, and they will know what to do. They'll basically use kind of round-robin-ish load balancing strategy, decisions, right, to pick the next one. Node.js, the process, I can show the code, actually. I can show the...
Now, anytime you click the browser where the subscription handler is going to get torn down, right? You move on to the next page you're viewing in Moodle.
Yes.
The subscription handler is going to get torn down because it's tied to the DOM.
Well, current Moodle.
Yeah.
Yes, so current Moodle, yes. That's why I'm saying we need to build this on top of Moodle Mobile.
So you never leave the page.
Exactly, it's a single page application. So we have an implementation. We have an implementation of Moodle front-end today that is a single page application.
Okay.
It's in its early days, but it works, right? In fact, what is it? Prototype.moodle.com/mobile. There's a URL for it.
Well, it's the one that's used in the app now.
Yeah, so that Moodle Mobile 2 came out, so that's what the prototype was of.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. That's where you can see it.
Just download it on your phone now.
But not released.
That's fine, but it's a single web app, and you can see it running in your web browser as a single web app, right? I'm saying, remove the Chrome that fakes it like it's in your phone.
Yeah.
Right? You know how it has this selector that says, show it to me as if it was Nexus 7.
Yeah, I know.
Right? Okay, remove that Chrome running, so we bring the scaffolding. So we will never load a new page in this model. We can also think about another mode in which we have perhaps, maybe we broker this through a frame, or we broker this, we turn Moodle into a subtly framed.
I wonder if you can use service workers now that those are like becoming a thing.
Do they survive a page load? Maybe they do.
If they do, they allow you to attach something to the browser.
Okay, so maybe we do. Yeah, and they remain as long as you're under the domain.
Yeah, and then you have to destroy them when you want them to go away.
Okay, then maybe it's a better option than a frame. Yes. So we could put the broker and stash some information there.
I think this is really exciting, but couldn't you just leave your web infrastructure the way it is and have all the WSS traffic go to a different host in a different port? And so you basically have a black box that supports all of those types of messaging, so you don't have to affect your core system.
You can, this becomes part of your core system.
It would be a separate machine, but it's this is adding a value of instant updates, right?
So I think you can, if you point it, so if you send it to a different port, all the users that are going to have a problem with some limiting proxy or network restrictions are going to cry.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So if you literally say, let's go to a different port, if you literally say, let's go to a port that is non-standard,
Like the chat daemon.
yeah. So you're gonna have users who are behind some restricting firewall cry. So I'm trying to avoid proposing something that the standard configuration is that. What you can do is move this splitting decision to your load balancer, right? Or you can send the WebSocket connection to a different domain name.
Right.
So you could say, so you can send it to a different domain name, which goes to a different IP address, and then it goes directly.
Okay.
Still, I am going to say it is a good idea, even if you have it on a different machine, different infra, you're still probably going to want something like Apache or Nginx in front to pool a lot of the connections, to do the SSL, TLS, to do the TLS encryption, do the TLS encryption, because there are implementations of HTTPS that are native JavaScript. I wouldn't trust them with your actual security.
Create a template virtual machine that anybody could deploy to drop that in on their existing environment. Right?
I think he's concerned that you're making the complexity of setting up a standard Moodle install very complicated.
Yes, it will come up. So, so that's one of the things. So, if we want to do this, I think we are going to bring up the complexity up, and I think it's going to be unavoidable. It is going to be something so in this path, there are several things that add to the complexity, because if we build our front end that it works really well with this, it will kind of suck if you don't have it set it up. So essentially, you build it, to build it right and to really take advantage of it and and succeed in taking the leap we want to take. I don't think this should be an option.
The problem is you're gonna shut out all the small self-hosted. Everybody's small.
But that moves to Moodle.
But I'm not saying micro self-hosted. I'm saying you have lots of intermediate school districts and stuff that are a few thousand users. They don't have the money to pay a hosting provider, which is what you have to do when you get to this.
Okay. They're pre-cooked VMs. So the world in which easy hosting was the only way to achieve easy hosting was to slave ourselves down to minimum requirements. Super simple installation requirements are over, right? We were in that straitjacket. So that's not a straitjacket that we've worn for a decade. And I know this is controversial, and I don't expect everybody will agree, but I think it's time to cut that straitjacket And there's two important reasons.
Also
Yes.
solve that for small users, as long as you make sure they're clear what the minimum requirements are, is you can spend a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time, but an example of a project that has done this, a really complex piece of software, Big Blue Button, they have turned it into a package that, but then they say, this is the only distro we support.
Yep.
That's their solution,
Exactly.
but it works really well.
So we can ship a VM. We can do all the work because this is going to
I
need
still
a
think-
message queue, right? This is going to need a message queue, and people are shipping VMs.
I think you are going to be shutting out a surprisingly large amount of your user base.
Okay, Martin Dugiamas is running the EC Moodle stuff.
What does that have to do with anything? I'm not saying it's not possible to do.
Right.
I'm saying I think you're going to shut out a surprisingly large amount of your user base if you move to this model.
Okay.
Don't we shut out a large number of our user base by saying eventually we need PHP 7, right? Like, aren't we
Yeah,
shipping out a
okay,
large
well,
number of our
it's
user base every
controversial.
time we
Now-
up any requirement with the project?
But
But you're getting really.
Okay.
No, I agree.
Okay,
This is much bigger
I'll
than
say
that.
something. I'll say something that is really interesting, and is that Canvas is much harder to host than Moodle, and that's not stopping them at all.
But don't they predominantly provide Canvas as a service?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Canvas does?
But you
I
can
don't
also
even think
install
you
it
could solve
yourself.
those.
You can install it yourself. You can
I mean, if we want Moodle to become software as a service, then just say that and go that route. But you.
I want the features. I want the features.
So,
But I'm just gonna.
is your concern that these small self-hosted groups, because I represent one of those, though probably with more technical know-how, is your concern that they wouldn't be able to stand up a VM or a Docker image or something like that?
Correct.
They just wouldn't have the technical know-how.
They wouldn't have the technical know-how or the financial resources.
Mark, you had master good?
No. We need to install and set up Apache, but we don't think they can handle Vagrant? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, you wouldn't be running the server
But
already.
in Amazon, you can go to Amazon. What's the company that makes the boxes that have Moodle box? There's a Moodle box.
Bitnami?
Yeah, Bitnami. Right? How much? Have you installed the Bitnami?
Yeah, but that's still not. Whatever.
But the one thing is, there are school districts that host inside the school district, so they're not going to go to an outside.
Yeah.
They're not going to go to an outside service that are in the 100 user to a 1,000 and literally have one guy that knows
Usually part-time.
Okay.
possibly that knows anything about this. So we're going to potentially maybe
And it might be worthwhile.
Okay.
we might
I'll
be
admit
smart
it.
about
Okay.
it. We might be throwing
Okay,
those
guys,
people overboard.
I'll admit this is super controversial, and I don't entirely disagree with your concerns, right? I think that to an extent, we need to do it in some sense, and we need to look at how we ameliorate that pain, and exactly how. But I want to talk a little bit more about the technical details, and then we come back to the controversy.
I think we've already.
Yeah, we're out of time.
Okay.
Martin,
Okay.
just one question.
Yes.
What is the thing listening to the model that
Yes.
notifies?
Okay, so yes, so here you do have PHP and you have Moodle, and so if any one of the nice things of Angular, Restangular, I'll take it from if you update anything, you update it. Say you have a data structure and you have a template, and you say this turns from static content turns into form. You edit it. You issue a put request, and Angular is very helpful in that it can tell you which fields changed, right, and lots of nice things. And so it's back to PHP code that will modify the database, and you rig it up. You rig it up in our database layer, right? And in the database layer, you say this item of this table, and there's a magic channel, like. There's a channel that is /users, and somebody can subscribe to /users like that, and somebody can subscribe to /users 2, right? And so you basically say, you send an event to these two channels, right? And the event essentially says updated.
So basically, in the database layer, we have to notify.
At the database layer, you do this, and you basically, from PHP code, you pump a message to one of these.
Yep.
If you're using Postgres, you can set up triggers, but we are not going to because we want it pluggable, right?